along the path to spiritual maturation, there are ups and downs. If you look at it from one perspective, it looks like a setback. But it's really hard to gauge maturation, the process of maturing in your spirituality. Remembering that there's three basic paths to pick. You have jhana, which is the path of knowledge leading to wisdom. It's the path that's reached by inquiry. The big questions: who am I? What am I? What is this world? Reflection and the accumulation of all your experiences and the knowledge that you've gained, education, experience, experiential, experimental. This is a process of jhana, or the path leading to wisdom. Self-realization is how it's generally known. And then there is karma yoga, the yoga of action. Karma actually means action. And this is talking about selfless actions, selfless dedication to the betterment of others. And the third path is bhakti yoga, devotional yoga. This is chanting. This is worshiping your guru, teacher, worshiping the Buddha. Pure devotion. And as I introduce these three paths, I want to point out that from my experience, you don't pick the path as much as the path picks you. You have a propensity or a tendency towards one or the other. Sometimes there's a combination, a little bit of more than one, but there's a predominance. In other words, karma yoga, your actions, your selfless service to others could be coupled with karmic yoga, yoga of action. I think I transposed what I was trying to say. Bhakti yoga and karmic yoga can oftentimes be combined with, again, one of the two predominating: selfless service. Karma yoga. The actions, taking actions that promote the general good, combined with devotional concepts, promotional activities, even though it seems to be a more passive than active to silently pray, to serve your teacher, to chant your mantra, to study with devotion the sutras, a selfless love, karmic yoga, a selfless action. And jhana yoga, the accumulation of knowledge with the end game of turning it into wisdom, transforming it into wisdom. All the knowledge in the world won't get you anywhere, but a little bit of wisdom goes a long ways. For me, it was this third way, the jhana yoga, that picked me. Based on having an inquiring mind, a spirit that always, in the early part of my spiritual evolution, sought answers, questions. Questions become knowledge. Questions lead the way. Questions pave the way to knowledge, to acquisition of knowledge. And then I think at a certain point, at least for me, non-questioning, running out of questions, no longer having questions, is the hallmark, the telltale of some wisdom seeping in. A slow process. And by all measures, probably the most difficult of the three. That's what the scriptures, that's what the that's what the Upanishads and the Vedas in the Hindu transition, how they describe jhana yoga. The most difficult, but again, it's the one that I seem to have been the most equipped to pursue, to follow, to utilize. In the maturity, spiritual maturation or maturity, as I said in the beginning, has cycles. It looks like ups and downs. But the down will be higher than the previous up, and the up will be higher yet. This way doesn't seem to be the way of things, spiraling down like water down a drain. It doesn't seem to be the way that things are. It's spiraling up. So that again, each high will be higher than the previous high, and each low will be higher than the previous high. On this maturity, as I said earlier, a lot of time is necessary to accumulate information that turns, if all is working well, turns into knowledge. There's practical knowledge, useful knowledge at how to navigate the world as we find it. And that will evolve into more esoteric knowledge and deeper understanding. And hence the propensity for questions is that drive, that questioning drive, that fuels this transformation of knowledge, where it reaches its ultimate pinnacle in wisdom. Now, I've known people whose spiritual inquiry was bhakti yoga, and I love these people. The selflessness of completely putting oneself behind less than what's being worshipped. And I also know some people that have the karma yoga, that they're quite active, but everything they do is focused on other than themselves for the benefit. They truly are the ones that want to benefit all sentient beings. Something that the Buddha called on us all to do. But it seems to be different personality, different. The people that speak tend to be more of a passive personality, more able to accept. Surrender is the key, easier to surrender. Would gravitate towards bhakti, devotional yoga. Wow, we're active people that really want to be doing something, the do-gooders of the world. And I love them too. We need them too. Active people that are out there in the trenches, working with the less privileged, the diseased, those of us whose challenges might seem overwhelming. They do this action with the zeal, but it's unheralded. They don't proclaim themselves, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. No, they never say a word. They just do it. Incredible. Amazing. We're blessed to have them in this world. They truly do make the world a better place. And then the third category, jhana. Self-realization. And in a way, it's ironic because my first teacher, Paramahamsa Yogananda, who was not any longer in a body, I was born in 1948, he died in 1952. I wasn't familiar with his readings, his story until Autobiography of a Yogi. I had about 10 or 12, found it on my mom's bookshelf, as I've mentioned before, and felt this infinity. And, I've read a lot. People say, no, you can't have a teacher that's not in the body. Well, that runs counter to my experience. He was as live and as vibrant to me as in a way that nobody else was in my world for many years. So I don't know the truth of that. I'm just saying that one among the many. Maybe this is one of the things that where I differ from others, for better or worse. In my case, I feel like it was better. But Paramahamsa Yogananda his path was surely bhakti yoga. His devotion to his teacher, his devotion to his teacher's teacher, his devotion to his entire lineage that he could trace back was overpowering and amazing. He never wavered about his love for his teacher, his devotion to sharing their dharma, to introducing their dharma to the Western world. Truly the first yogi to come and live. And he spent his entire life from 20s, pushing 30s, till the time of his death. Incredible devotion, bhakti. But it's interesting that the first teacher that I recognized was definitely on a different path than I was. But it mattered not. I didn't want to follow in his footsteps. I wanted to experience what by following his direction and influence, following where it would take me. And the reason I'm talking about Paramahansa is not other than recognizing as a real influential key in my life. He started the self-realization fellowship, which I mentioned. Jnana Yoga is sometimes translated as self-realization. So here this Bhakti Yoga practitioner, disciple, follower. So an organization called Self-Realization. And it still exists in the US. I've been to his beautiful ashram in Malibu, California. Beautiful landscape. Wonderful, run by wonderful people. I've felt his blessings, felt the connection from walking on the land that he had walked before me. And it's just beautiful. Go there in Malibu, in the canyon, Laurel Canyon, overlooking the ocean, not far from Santa Monica, California. Go there if you have a chance. I mean, it's maybe the only sacred place that I've been fortunate enough to visit. So, from Bhakti Yogi practitioner, I was pointed towards Jnana Yoga and the process of accumulating knowledge, learning to question, learning to live, eventually in the transformation, leaving the questions behind. The questioning phase of the transformation, of the growth, was abandoned by me, no longer necessary. I just ran out of questions. Just go on. So the maturation, the maturity of my practice, this was a hallmark of my questioning, accumulating, leaving the questions behind, and then processing and pulling the wisdom that sometimes hid in the knowledge, and piecing it together and having it grow. So the process of surrender is, I think, differentiated in the timing, is at least differentiated in the three methods. It seems to me that bhakti, devotional, surrender has to be first and foremost. It's where they started. And it was effortless. They were the kind of people who were able, willing, anxious even, to surrender to whoever or whatever it was that was the source of their devotion, the target for their devotion, the recipient of their devotion. Whereas the active people, karma yoga seems to me, again, it's doing something, doing good for others actively. And maybe there's a little bit of tendency here when you've dedicated and done so much for others that it's probably natural to appreciate, if not seek, approval, recognition. And then this can become problematic, as you know. Once you separate I, me, my, once it becomes separate from, once it's divisive, once it starts to hint of any kind of judgment, what I'm doing is I'm judging it to be so selfless. Now, perhaps, the next stage would be surrender. And the process, I think, because you're more invested, you're more active, I think the process of surrendering might not be as natural. And it would come at a different state of the maturation, of the maturity of your spiritual, physical together, physical, of your spiritual journey. So here surrender plays its role, but it comes in, and I would anticipate, I would suspect, because my expertise is not here, this is not what resonated with me, this karma yoga. I would suspect that the surrendering process was a little more traumatic. It took more effort. I had to learn some lessons along the way, some humbling lessons perhaps. But surrender they do. And then the third case, and maybe this is part of why the pundits would say that it's the most difficult, the most arduous path of the three. Surrender comes much later in the process. no less important because surrender is a key. But the thinking person, the person in pursuit of knowledge, oftentimes, myself included, can be a little bit hard-headed. Once we start figuring out things, once we know that there's an ultimate goal here, the goal to change, transform knowledge into wisdom. Much like an alchemist, right? Iron into gold. Transmutation. Very similar. And I've said before that I would be, I'm inclined to be a wizard type, Alchemy, magic, make-believe, all had a place and an appeal in my journey. So I was farther into the process, well into the abiding awakening, which I've said took 30 years, stressed over 30 years. I was well into that, probably almost at the apex of non-abiding awakening, where it became obvious that it was time to surrender. I think the end of my questions, which again also came almost at the apex of my non-abiding awakening over this 30-year period. It took 30 years of questions to get to the point. It's only recent, in recent memory, where I put down the mantle of extreme questioning almost to the level of inquisition. Inquiring minds want to know. Inquiring minds need to know. So I think as a consequence, because physically I was more mature, emotionally I was more mature, intellectually I was certainly more mature, that surrender was tough. Struggled with that because it came so late in the game. But come it did. And it was only upon surrendering, to breathe, to let go, that the inklings, the final traces of my ego, the spiritual ego that thinks it's superior to the gross, mechanical, low-level ego. Nevertheless, ego it is, because it implied judgment. It implied evaluation, seeing yourself as better than others. And that surrendering leads to accepting the sameness, to accepting ordinariness. That what you see, that we're all enlightened, just in different stages of the awakening process. And we all remember, at some level, we remember what it indeed felt like to see ourselves in our true glory. So those three paths, I don't know anybody that ever got to choose one. I don't know at what stage that you begin to recognize that, which one has chosen you. Probably depends on how much you paid attention, how mindful you are. To recognize your own patterns. To recognize the patterns that are pointing you on your path. The path of all three, of course, as this reach the same destination with no differentiation. One is not better than the other. It's simply a matter of which one calls you, which one your current conditions lend itself to. But again, not much difference. No difference at all as far as consequences as based on results, based on recognition of what is. Best of enlightenment, being in the light. No difference, just different methodology, different tools. Tools of the trade, so to speak. Which leads me to where I was going with this whole chapter, this whole dialogue. An all-time favorite, Bob Dylan, had a song. We've all got to serve somebody. Gotta serve somebody. Yes, indeed. That song means so much to me. Music just resonates. Music can express accumulated knowledge very well for me. It puts me in a proper frame of mind to pursue maturity. After abiding enlightenment, there's a whole nother story of maturation, a whole nother story. You go back to being a helpless infant, at least that was my experience, and you mature at a more rapid rate than you did the first time, granted. But you mature, you must. And remember, gotta serve somebody.